Just stand up and say, Mr. Mayor, lost the plot. May the Lord give this council the wisdom, discernment and courage to serve the community. Grant also that we may act compassionately and with integrity in the best interest of this shire, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. I would like to show respect and acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land and elders past, present and future on which this meeting takes place. This meeting has been audio recorded and those in attendance should refrain from making any offensive statements. There are no other recordings of this meeting without prior authorisation of council. Thank you, councillors. Okay, 2 councillors on Zoom can hear us. Just one at the moment. Okay then, Councillor Flaherty will come in when she's ready. Application for attending meeting by video link. Applications have been received from Councillor Burns and Councillor Flaherty. Got a mover? Move Councillor Abbott. Seconder? Councillor Watts. All in favour? Against? Carried. Apologies, application for leave or absence by councillors.
I'd like to apply for leave from the 3rd of March to the 24th of March with Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Need a mover for that. Move Councillor Campbell. Second, Councillor McPhee. All in favour? Against? Carried. Public participation? None. Nil. Okay. Is that Councillor Flaherty coming in? Okay, councillors, over to the ordinary council meeting held on the 31st of January. Confirmation of the minutes. Can I mover? Move Councillor Williamson. Second, Councillor McPhee. Questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you. According to the Code of Meeting Practice, Clause 19.1, Council is required to keep full and accurate minutes. I'd just like to point out on page 12 that the point of order called on me resulting in closure of discussion is not noted. So therefore, and also neither is it noted that we then workshopped after we had initially moved and seconded the following foreshadowed motion. So I'd just like to note that that needs to be in the minutes. Thank you.
Happy with that, Mr. GM?
Yeah, we can amend the minutes accordingly.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just want clarification. Do I now vote on this or do I vote against it? What should I do?
With Councillor Abbott, you're not happy with the minutes, you'll vote against the minutes. So show of hands, all those in favour. Can't see. Oh yes, so we've got Councillor Burns, Councillor Collison, Councillor Williamson, Councillor McPhee and Councillor Campbell for. And show of hands for those against is Councillor Abbott, Councillor Clout, Councillor Watts. Councillor Flaherty, is she with us? Yeah. She hasn't shown a hand though up for either, has she? Councillor Flaherty, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. It just dropped out and I had a phone call from Karen checking that I was online. So no, I'm not voting for it for the same reasons as Councillor Abbott.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillors, we'll move on to disclosure of interests.
Mr. Mayor, I've got one disclosure of interest. It's from myself. It's in regard to item CR 2.7, the General Manager's Performance Review. I'm declaring a pecuniary significant interest as it discusses my performance review on my contract. As a result, myself and all the staff will leave the room during the discussion of that matter.
Thank you. No others? No, that's it. Okay, mayoral minutes, nil. Reports, straight over to page 13. SCR 02.1, Environmental Community Services Committee, got a mover. Move Councillor Watts, second. Councillor McPhee. No, sorry, we're going to go back. We're going to do these individually. Sorry, so we'll just do dot point 1 is move Councillor Watts, second Councillor McPhee. Questions, comment, discussion. All in favour, show of hands, please. Councillor Flair, yes, that's all in favour. We'll go to dot point 2, DESC 02.1, adopt the Environmental and Community Services Committee Charter. Move Councillor Watts, second by Councillor McPhee. Any questions, comment, discussion around that? All in favour, show of hands. Oh, it is too. It's a lot easier. So all in favour, that's fine. Dot point 3, I won't read it out, councillors, you can see it in front of you there. We've got a mover. Move Councillor McPhee, second Councillor Watts. Questions, comment, discussion. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. I asked at the meeting, and I still ask, how can we approve our own DA? And then further to that, I have questions. Have we negotiated an adequate police response for the event with the relevant New South Wales Police Force District Commander? And have we provided the relevant New South Wales Police Force District Commander with a detailed site plan and of the proposed event site, as we're supposed to do in the consent orders at least 30 days beforehand? And the same with the emergency management plan, which we also need to have done. Have we submitted those event plans? I mean, those relevant site plans and emergency management plans?
Mr. GM or Mr. Pringle? Mr. Pringle? Mr. GM.
Yeah, no, the Director can answer the question in regard to Council approving its own DA. In regard to the police, they've been continuously liaised with and they have all the necessary information they need at this stage in regard to traffic and emergency management.
So just to clarify, we actually have sent site plans and an emergency management plan.
The contractor who runs the event is responsible for submitting the emergency plan, and Council has submitted a traffic management plan with the police, and the police have been continuing to liaise with both the event manager and Council in regard to additional resources that they may need and various aspects of the event that they have concerns with.
So do we know if Mr. Paul Bennett has done, I know if he's responsible for it, do we know whether he's done it?
I don't have anything in front of me to confirm it, but I was led to believe that it happened several weeks ago. I can probably follow that up for you, Councillor. Yeah,
I'll follow that. Mr. Pringle, you'd like to answer the DA question?
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. Under the legislation, Council is the determining authority for this application. There is no other authority. The application was independently reviewed or assessed independently, and the recommendation is what came before the committee.
Okay, we had a mover of Councillor.
Sorry. I had a question.
Oh, question, sorry.
Just in regards to the fire preparedness on the museum, I understand that the pump infrastructure was going in for the water and so forth. Has that been implemented yet?
Mr. GM.
I think you're talking about the sprinkler system, Councillor.
Yeah.
The building was being tested a couple of weeks ago. All the external sprinklers are operational and the internal sprinklers are operational as well.
Great, thank you.
Councillor McPhee moved it. Councillor Watts second. Yep. All in favour, show of hands. Councillor Collison, Flaherty, Burns, Williamson, Watts, McPhee, Tout, Campbell 4. Councillor Abbott against. Motion's carried. Dot point 4, DESC 02.3. Got a mover. Move Councillor McPhee. Got a seconder? Councillor Campbell. Any questions, comment, discussion around it? Councillor Abbott?
Yes, thank you. I just want to know, why is this item without a title? In fact, the title that it actually had at the standing committee, because isn't it specific to what we're looking at?
Mr Pringle?
Through Mr Mayor, normally we wouldn't put titles against the items. It is the recommendation that was made by the committee that you see before you.
So just for clarification, this is to do then with the Merriwar Conservation Area?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Sorry, just further to that, thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. So it is only for Merriwar, it's not for any of the other towns?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, councillor, we had a mover and a seconder. All in favour? Liz has disappeared. Oh no, there she is. Yep, that's carried. All in favour? Thank you. Over to page SCR 02.2, Infrastructure Services on page 36. Got a mover. Move Councillor Campbell. Seconder, Councillor McPhee. Questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. On page 41.12, it's not the question I raised. I raised that Michael Reid is frustrated with his dealings with council with respect to EV charging, in that council proceeded so far in discussions with him and then cancelled undertakings council had agreed to undertake. In light of climate change, I also raised need for more EVs, and my question was, what is to happen next?
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. No further questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page SCR 02.2, Corporate Services Committee, page 48. Mover, move Councillor Abbott. Second, Councillor Burns. Questions, comment, discussions? All in favour? Against? That's carried. Committee delegate report, section 355 and advisory committees. We've got a mover. Move Councillor Watts.
Can I just ask, are we moving them all together or are we moving them individually?
We'll have to go through them individually. Is everyone got a copy or just? I think everyone should have a copy.
Mr. Chair, I believe that we can actually move all of them unless someone has an issue with one of the points.
Well, if there's no issue, I need to probably read them out, Mr. GM, wouldn't I? Are we happy with and just do the audit risk separately when we get to it?
Mr. Mayor, I think call for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Once you've got a mover and a seconder during debate, you can then discuss the individual representatives on each of the committees for adoption.
Okay, we've got a mover.
I'd just like to flag that I am going to vote against item number 1.
Yeah, we can't discuss until we get a mover. So we've got to need a mover, Councillor Campbell, and a seconder, Councillor Clout. Okay, now questions, comment, discussion. We'll move into that. Mr. Jam, do you wish to go through them individually or not?
Yeah, Council, now, given that you have now adopted the proposed changes to the committee structure, I think it's relevant that you now appoint the councillors to each of those committees in accordance with the numbers against each committee member. So do the internals maybe first, and then we can move on to the external committees.
So we'll do this one first. So we all got a copy in front of us.
Could I just flag something with the Code of Meeting Practice, clause 13 and 13.1. Basically, obviously, council can consider multiple items of business, but I have flagged that I'm voting against number 1. So how does that play out now?
Councillor, we've just...
You'll have to vote against the full recommendation, Mr. GM.
Yeah, well, I guess the alternative, Mr. Mayor, is you call for a vote on point 1 before we move on to point 2 to ensure that we've got
Full support.
full support of the committees, or at least enough support to move into the committee structure.
Okay, then councillor, we're going to dot point 1.
Also, just a quick question. Am I missing the roads committee? Did that end up being put up that we discussed?
We discussed it, councillor Flaherty, but you never put anything in writing.
I thought that the staff were going to put that up in terms of the recommendation.
Yes, Mr. GM, there's something in there somewhere.
It's discussed in the body of the report, but it's not part of the recommendation. It would require a councillor to move it tonight if they wished it to be included.
I wish it to be included.
Okay, well, Mr. GM, I think we'll do dot point 1 first.
As written, or with at the moment, you've got a councillor requesting a modification. That sounds like it's been moved.
We've had a mover and a seconder already.
For the original.
For the original.
So you've now got a councillor that's probably putting up a foreshadowed motion, or probably considered as an alternate motion.
Alternate motion. So if you wish to council, then I'll have to come back to a foreshadowed motion.
No, I think deal with it as an amended. So there's an amendment before council to adopt the advisory committees, but include one additional one, which is a roads committee. Being an amendment, you'll need to vote on that first. If it's carried, it becomes the motion. If it's not carried, we go back to the original.
Okay, councillor Flaherty, you want to put a dot point 5?
Yes, I'm not sure the process, but I'd like to see a roads committee incorporated.
Okay, so we're going to have 5 points of recommendation.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think it's easier to do. It's still point 1, but it's an amendment to point 1. So it's adopt the proposed changes to council's 355 and advisory committees as outlined in attachment 1 with the addition of a roads committee.
Yeah, well, that will be clear, actually. Councillor Flaherty, are you happy with that?
Yep, sure.
We'll just deal with dot point 1, councillors, adding plus a roads committee.
Yep.
All right. Those in favour of the small amendment?
We'll need a seconder.
Can we comment on it first before we go vote on it?
What's that?
Yes, so Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to comment on it. I would just like to say I am very sad that we have subsumed a lot of the community committees. And in my opinion, this is a blow for democracy and it's a blow for community engagement. I think it is very disappointing that I am very happy to see that we're having the community committees of the towns, but I am sad that we're subsuming the library, heritage, sustainability more than anything in this time of climate change, when now never before has this been so important that we need to reduce our emissions, and that just getting rid of the sustainability committee, which had on it from the community real experts in this field. And I'm very, very disappointed that we will no longer have that representation from the community, particularly in this one. Same with the library, we had expert people there, and with heritage as well. It is a great loss. Thank you.
Okay, councillor, we're going back to the small amendment on dot point 1 only, the adding of roads. Show of hands for that recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, can we just see a seconder as well, please?
Yeah, seconder was Lee. Councillor Watts.
Oh, sorry, that didn't come through.
Councillor Watts, you moved second the amendment? No, okay then. Well, we haven't got a seconder for the amendment. I think you did. Okay, well, Councillor Watts has seconded it, so that opens the debate.
Can I just speak to? I'm for the adopted proposals, but the roads committee I think is actually redundant considering we have a infrastructure committee, which essentially is the roads committee. People do talk to us anyway, so the roads are the biggest concern that we have. That's goes without saying. But the issue that I have with this committee is if you put 4 people on there, that will cover about 400 k's of road, because they will all have their own little patches. We have to cut through that, and that's what the infrastructure committee does for us.
Okay, taking on note. So everyone happy? I'll put the recommendation up.
Could
Can
I
I-
add something?
Sorry, I was wanting to speak on it.
Clarity, councillor, you speaking for or against the?
Against? I'd
Against?
just like to say that as I mentioned last time, I'm just confused where it fits in the infrastructure of our meetings, because it actually doesn't feed into any committee and it doesn't get any traction from a committee. So I fail to see how it would fit in the plan that we've got. I assumed that every single advisory committee would have an agenda item that's on roads, and that would then feed into the infrastructure committee. So I'm just confused about where that would be placed, and that's why I wouldn't be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. You wish to speak?
Yes, I do. So the Roads Committee would feed into the Infrastructure Committee, just as all the other smaller committees feed into one of those main committees. So it would be no different in that regard. I think the difference is that this is probably the most raised matter of everything in the Shire that we hear. So we have a range of committees for different things and different specialised areas. So I think that a Roads Committee would be good in terms of giving it the profile and voice that it needs. I think it would also be good because you would have a range of people from throughout the Shire sit on that and represent roads, but not from a town-based perspective exclusively, which the town-based committees will be looking at just their town. And I think that there needs to be a higher level of cooperation and collaboration throughout the Shire. And I think that would be advantageous for the community representatives from the different areas to be on one committee where they discuss the needs of each other's areas, that it's not just becoming parochial from each, Scone, Aberdeen town-based committee, but that they're working collaboratively and they can see the bigger picture of the Shire. So I take Councillor Burns's point in terms of things being able to go through the town-based committees, but I think that this would be important in taking a Shire-wide approach and having more of a collaborative understanding. I also think that it's important in terms of looking at, as we have previously discussed, whilst they are not in a position to advise on funding or priorities of funding for roads at this stage, that could be really valuable to have them understand the processes and priorities of roads now, so that when it does come around time for the budget, we've got people in the community who've been educated, who are informed of the range of issues with roads and can help us in that decision making in terms of resourcing.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. So no more speakers. We'll put the motion up with plus roads as under point 1. Those for the new.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Burns, you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I don't mind who answers this, but how often would this committee meet? Yeah.
Really, I shouldn't let you speak there because Councillor Flaherty was the last speaker. So I think I'll just put the motion up. Councillor Burns. Okay, so the motion, show of hands for the motion with the plus roads. Show of hands, please. I've only got Councillor Flaherty and Councillor Watts for it. Sorry, Councillor Flaherty, your motion has been lost. So I'll go back, Councillor, I'll do them all individually now. I'll go back to dot point 1 as is. Got a mover? Well, we had a mover of Councillor Ron, I think. Councillor Campbell as is. Seconder for as is. Councillor McPhee. Questions, comment, discussion? All in favour, show of hands. So we've got Campbell, Clout, McPhee, Watts, Williamson, Collison 4. No, sorry, Burns and Councillor Flaherty 4. And Councillor against, Councillor Abbott. Okay, we'll move on. We'll do them separately. Appoint council members to the various council committees. So, Mr. GM, we've only got the one. Do you want me to read them all out apart from the audit risk?
Yeah, I think if you can
Individually?
just read the nominees.
Yep.
Where there's more nominees than vacancies, we'll work out the process.
Which was only the audit and risk as far as I remember.
Yep.
That's correct. So I'll read them out. Community Advisory Committee, the Scone District is Councillor Flaherty, Councillor Burns and Councillor Watts. Community Advisory Committee on Aberdeen is Councillor McPhee and Councillor Williamson. Community Advisory Committee Merriwar is Councillor Clout and Councillor Campbell. Community Advisory Committee on Marundi is Councillor Burns and Councillor Flaherty.
Can I just say, Mr. Mayor, could you slow down a second so Robin's got a chance?
How can you see Robin? She's already got a copy, Councillor Burns.
I was watching her type at the same time.
Do you wish me to slow down, Councillor Robin? You have a hard copy, haven't you?
It's just, I'm just trying. I can write
Okay.
If you don't want to, it doesn't need to.
We'll do it later. Thank you, Councillor Burns. You're a little bit active for I've just been to a conference all day. What I might do is go through the rest, councillors, and we'll come back to do the voting on the audit risk. Does that suit you all? General Manager's Performance Review. That'll be as required. The Upper Hunter Shire Traffic Committee is myself, alternative for Councillor Campbell. Merriwell Age Hostel Committee is Councillor Campbell. The Billrose Management Committee will be Councillor McPhee and Councillor Burns. That'll be the change of the charter when it comes to the next meeting to 2. The Floodplain Management Committee is Councillor Clout, Councillor Williamson and Councillor McPhee. The Scone Airport Committee will be myself and Councillor Williamson. The Scone Upper Hunter Regional Sale Yards will be Councillor McPhee, myself and Councillor Williamson. White Park Management Development Committee will be Councillor McPhee, Councillor Watts and Councillor Clout. The Upper Hunter and Kiora Youth Music Committee, GM to delegate. The Merriwar Showground Management Committee will be Councillor Campbell. The Settlement Hall Committee is not applicable. Scone Town Revitalisation Committee is Councillor Burns and Councillor Flaherty. And that'll be the change of the charter to at the next meeting to 2. Okay, councillors.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask, did we add an extra person to the Scone district? It says 2 on there, but there's 3 people.
Which one was that, Councillor Watts?
The first one,
Scone.
Community Advisory Committee.
I think there were 4 for Scone, was there?
We've got 3.
Yeah, so
No, the charter. Yep.
So I think we said, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think we said we would change the charter for Scone, Aberdeen, Merriwar and Marundi to 2 to 3 councillors.
Yep. I think, but Mr. GM, you'll go through all this now and.
Yeah, councillors, we can accommodate up to 3. I think it's probably safest in the charter. At the moment, there's 2 for the 3 smaller towns and 3 for Scone. But if at a later stage another councillor wishes to nominate, the charter will allow for it.
Okay. Councillor, we'll move back up now down to the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. We need 2 with an alternative, and we've got 4, Councillor McPhee, Councillor Abbott, Councillor Flaherty and Councillor Williamson. So, Mr. GM, hand it over to you for a vote.
Right, I'll conduct a vote. Given that we've got 2 councillors off site, I think the best way again is to do it by open show of hands. We did have a chat about methodology before. The easiest way is we'll do 1 vote. We'll go around. I will read out the 4 nominees, and if there is an equal tie required for we'll have a separate vote to do a tiebreaker. So the first nominee, sorry, I've got 4 nominees. Each councillor gets 1 vote. So for Councillor Abbott, who votes for Councillor Abbott to be on ARIC? So I've got Abbott, Collison, Watts and Clout and Flaherty. For Councillor Flaherty, nil. For Councillor McPhee, I've got Campbell and McPhee. And for Williamson. Oh, Burns, sorry. Burns, sorry. And for councillor Williamson, I've got Williamson as 1. So that gives 5 votes for councillor Abbott, 3 for councillor McPhee and 1 for councillor Williamson. So going on those voting, Mr Mayor, you would have councillor Abbott and McPhee as your 2 representatives, with councillor Williamson as the alternate.
All clear? Well done. Okay, we'll go down, councillors, to dot point 3, appoint councillors to the various external committee bodies. I've got to read them out too, I suppose. The AGL Macquarie Generation Community is the mayor or staff delegate. Arts, the Upper Hunter is staff appointed in January, so I'm not sure who that was. The Darkbrook Coal Mine Committee is councillor McPhee. The Hunter Joint Organisation of Councils Incorporated is myself and the General Manager. The Upper Hunter Energy Park Community Forum is councillor Burns. Just make sure you raise your hand if I put you in and you're not happy. The Liverpool Range Wind Farm Community Consultative Committee is councillor Campbell. The Liverpool Range Bushfire Management Committee is myself. Mid-North Weight of Loads is staff. Scona District Chamber of Commerce and Industry is staff. Stonecoat Time Ore Limestone Quarry Community is councillor Campbell. The Upper Hunt Air Quality Monitoring Network is mayor or staff delegate. The Upper Hunter County Council Weeds Authority is councillor Campbell, myself and councillor Clout. That is it. No, we haven't, no. So councillor, we'll go back now. We've sorted all that out. Can I have a mover for dot points 2, 3 and 4 as a whole?
So moved.
Councillor Burns and councillor Clout. Any questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? All good? Okay, against there's nil. Thank you, councillors. Took a bit, but we got there. Over to page 72, C02.2, Australia Day Committee, Merriwell District. Move councillor Campbell, second councillor Clout. Questions, comment, discussion? All in favour? Councillor Flaherty? In favour? Yep, all in favour? Against? Carried. I know what it's like. You've been to a conference all day. Okay, councillor, over to page 75. Is a planning proposal 1/2018 additional. Did it move?
I moved it, yes.
Move, councillor
Seconded.
Abbott. Second, councillor Burns, is it?
Yep.
Questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you. I support the staff recommendation that we don't proceed with the planning proposal. I just want to mention that the 1 in 100-year floods are no longer a thing. Climate change is wreaking havoc, and changing the LEP for this business would not be right. Just doing this almost ad hominem change of zones. So we've had a lot of submissions, and they've laid out their concerns about noise, about pollution, about flooding, about the tanks being underground. We have to reduce emissions in an emergency and an immediate manner. And we just don't have any time for these new fossil fuel businesses, and we shouldn't be bending over backwards. So I really am very happy to see the staff propose this, and that this planning proposal is that we're not to proceed with it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Abbott. Show of hands, all in favour? No more questions? No, all in favour, hands please. Councillor Burnett, yep, all in favour, against is carried. Over to page 229, G02.4, Cumberland Place Hostel resident travel cost to appointments.
We've missed a couple.
No, I missed one, sorry. I've got a sticky here. G02.2, request for financial assistance. No,
I
that's not
think
it
we've
either.
we've missed the food organic, garden organics on page 201.
I've lost a sticky page is what's happened to me. Here we go, page 201, correct?
Yes.
Righto. E02.1, food,
Moved.
organic, garden, organics, curbside collection update. Got a mover?
Moved.
Councillor Abbott. Second, Councillor McPhee. Any questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Watts.
I had lots of notes, but they've disappeared again. But in relation to the general waste going to a weekly, from a weekly to a fortnightly, has it been thought about with parents with 5 or 6 children that have disposable nappies? So that's an issue I think that needs to be addressed prior to making a decision of saying that you're going to a two weekly bin. And that wouldn't be the only thing. I mean, there's also other issues around that in relation to pants and things like that that also go in the bins. Would there be a concession for those type of things? So I'd just like to make sure that that's raised before we go and put a contract in.
Mr Pringle.
Through Mr Mayor, we'll certainly focus on education leading up to this. It's something that I guess a lot of councils have already rolled out, and they've had the same sorts of concerns and comments from the community, and they've managed to address those issues, and their programs are quite successful. So I think it's all about behaviour change and adapting to the new system. So I'm sure through education and trying to work with the community that we can roll this out successfully.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Just like to, just through you, Mr Mayor, if I could ask Mr Pringle, the rubbish probably is reduced with the food organics and garden material going into its own bin. And do we know whether they take nappies, disposable nappies, if they're the compostable ones, and the same with the pants as well that we may use, that there are the compostable ones, are they able to go in this?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice, but I'm not aware of any that can be taken at this stage.
Any more questions, comments? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Only just perhaps a clarification that we're going to take out food waste, but the other materials that put in some of the bins do have a smell, and if we're only going to be picking them up a couple of weeks, I suggest that it's going to be, especially in the hot weather. I think really that there should be weekly. I can't see how it's going to work if they're not picked up weekly, because there's enough odour that comes out after the weekly pickups and then leave them for 2 weeks. So I'd like to see that investigated before we make a decision.
Mr Pringle, no further comment?
I don't have any further comment, Mr Mayor.
It's one of those, yeah, there's a lot of people interested in doing it and a lot of other shires, but anyway, it's up to council. So, yeah.
Mr Mayor, if I may, this isn't the first time this has been done. It's not being done yet. It's only for note, but it's not new.
Mr Mayor?
Yes, Councillor McPhee.
I think we also have to remember this is actually state legislation, so we have very little choice. It will be a state legislation in the future, and I think we're on the foot, but what we're doing is being proactive about that. So I think we also need to consider that it's a mandate, a future mandate for us as a council.
Okay, councillors.
And I'd just like to say that I don't think that we're disagreeing with that in any way. What I'm saying is we need more information, especially around things like that, because we couldn't get an answer just then. And yeah, before we can go and do that, I know that they've done it in many places, so let's ask them how.
Mr Mayor, I don't think it'd be unreasonable in our tender just to ask for a price to have an additional service if requested by a resident, and whether that price is either absorbed by the entire system or actually assigned to the resident can be a decision of this council.
So that was moved by Councillor Abbott. You happy to add that?
Pardon?
are you happy that you move the
Yes,
recommendation?
I'm happy with that, but I agree with both Councillor Burns and McPhee that this has been done before and this is going to be mandated, and that we have a problem with landfills and that we're already looking at closing them down. So we definitely have to do this, but I also understand where Councillor Watts is coming from, that some people have a lot of general waste because they can't avoid it. So yes, I think that's a good amendment, but I really recommend this, and I think it's fantastic that it's come before us, and what is set out here is really the way we need to be going. So yes, I think it's wonderful, and I'm fully behind this. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're just going to add those words, Mr. GM, to Councillor Abbott's.
Mr. Mayor, I was suggesting that we just do that as part and parcel of our internal process.
Okay, so it was moved, Councillor Abbott, second by Councillor Williamson. Councillor Williamson, you like to make a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly ask of Director through you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm very supportive of the whole rollout as well. What's the risk with the contamination of the FOGO, and will there be a financial repercussion back to us in the case of that going over?
Mr. Pringle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's always, the potential for contamination. And I think other councils that have rolled this out, they find that there is that issue at the start, but then over time that drops off. But again, it's about educating the community. So.
No further questions?
Yes, so I'd just like to finish. So I, through you, Mr. Mayor, completely agree with Mr. Pringle that a lot of this now comes down to education and communication, and we need to be really proactive about this, because we can do this, but we obviously need to assist people with information. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we'll put the recommendation up. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Over to page 206, E02.2, Draft Hunter Regional Plan 2041.
So moved.
Moved, Councillor Burns. Second, Councillor McPhee. Any questions, comment, discussion?
Make a comment on it.
Just a
Mr. Mayor.
clarification on page 206, dot point 1.5, a focus on creating a region of up to 15-minute mixed-use neighbourhoods in various contexts as a response to the new ways of living and working in light COVID-19 pandemic, including people, place on local vibrant neighbourhoods where most needs can be met with a 15-minute walk, bike or drive the rural areas. Could someone just explain that a little more? I just think it's a little bit vague.
Through Mr. Mayor, the draft Hunter Regional Plan includes a new planning concept where it talks about 15-minute regions, where it suggests that people should be able to live somewhere within 15 minutes of services they need to access that for their day-to-day needs. I have raised the point, we raised the point in the submission, draft submission, that it may be difficult in rural areas. So if you turn to page 211, at the top of the page there, I've got a section raising concerns about that particular model for the Upper Hunter, that it simply won't work in some areas.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just further that, thank you. I do believe that probably the idea is very fine. I'm certainly supportive of it. However, I think that if it's, I just find that in some of these areas and the public transport, that's something that's been brought up at Merriwar, and there's no public transport. Well, public transport has to be commercially viable, and I think we've got to think about that before we start to recommend that sort of thing, because there's no taxi service in some areas because it's not viable. That's basically the same thing. Thank
you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, so I just wanted to know, when did we consider this to actually, through you, Mr. Mayor, to set off to enable the GM's letter, which I do agree with. It's very, yes, I was just wondering, when did council go through this? It's very city-centric, as Councillor Campbell has pointed out. I mean, the 15-minute areas is impossible for us. And I think also underpinning all of this is the removal of important red tape and essentially the removal of local government from many of the decisions that we have made to date. And it does concern me, and looking at all the names of these towns, it again raises my concerns about being part of the Hunter Joint Organisation, because we're not being considered here. So I feel very anxious about the draft Hunter Regional Plan in that we're being left out. And I agree with the General Manager's letter, but I think endorsing this draft submission is very problematic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So we've had the move of Councillor Burns and second.
Can I speak to it, please, Mr. Mayor?
You put your hand up, Mr. Burns. You certainly
Yeah,
can.
I did a couple of times. The first point in the strategic vision, policy positions and objectives about the Hunter Urban Development Program Committee, really happy about that. However, the structure of that committee, as Councillor Abbott just alluded to, with the city-centric nature of this plan, and it's about Newcastle, I think we need to encourage the members of that committee to be, they need to be members of our councils, so HJO, not necessarily the mayor, not necessarily the GM, but it needs to be more like a roving chairman. It can't be one with an agenda. It needs to go around. So, you know, the upper hunter gets a sit in the big chair for a while. I know that there are other things that our mayors and GMs have been involved in before where they were the chair. That's great, not a problem. But this needs to be more shared around instead of focusing on everything getting to Newcastle, which is what they do.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. No other comment? So move, Councillor Burns, second, Councillor McPhee. We'll put it up as is. All in favour? Show of hands. So Councillor Burns, Councillor Flaherty, Councillor McPhee are for it and against. Collison, Williamson, Watts, Clout, Campbell, Abbott. So that motion has just been lost as is. So, okay then, we'll move over. To pay G02.1, renewal of alcohol-free zones. Recommendation in front of you there, councillors. Councillor Campbell, second. Councillor Clout. Questions, comment, discussion?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor. I think these things are pretty practical. They have worked, and I believe in all the towns, and certainly not inhibiting anyone that wants to enjoy a few drinks. But they've worked very well, and there's something I think it's very good. I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. No more questions, comment, discussion?
Just a question.
Clarity.
Just in terms of the alcohol-free zones, I'm just thinking in terms of events that we may want to hold in the future. You know, in Denman, they had a food and wine festival. Will these alcohol zones prevent us from being able to hold such a thing in the future? Or I know that some community groups are looking at having a long lunch down Kelly Street. Would that preclude them being able to have wine with their lunch?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess anyone proposing something like that would need to submit an application to council and have council resolve to allow that event.
No more questions? Show of hands, all in favour? All in favour, none against, it's carried. The request for financial assistance, Disaster Relief Australia and Blaze Aid. Move, Councillor Watts, second, Councillor Williamson. Any questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Campbell, does that grin mean you're going to speak or just a grin?
Well, I wasn't going to, but I shall.
Well, you don't have to.
Anyway, look, being out in that area and seeing some of the devastation that has taken place with the floods and the fire, it's more than probably what we would normally donate, but look, it's really good, and the results have been very much appreciated by those out in those areas, and so I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. All in favour? No more questions? No, all in favour? Motion's carried. Over to 223. These must be cheap stickers on this paper, Robin. Okay, question for no, moved by councillor Watts, second. Councillor Campbell. Questions, comment, discussion? All in favour?
I have just one thing to ask. You had a, excuse me, I'm just hoping that particular area out there that's alongside the railway station will be available for us to include some of the tourist ideas that would come up, especially the one from Rob Tyndall regarding the recognition of the pioneers, etc. out there. So I'm just, it's a great area, and I think it will certainly enhance our area of tourist hub at Merriwall.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. The General Manager and I went out last week and met Mr Baker. It looks good, and it's, yes, well done. Congratulations to them. So all in favour? Against? Carried. Over to page 229, G02.4, Government Place Hostel Resident Travel Cost to Appointments. Move Councillor Watts, second Councillor Campbell. Any questions, comment, discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Campbell.
Oh, it's all right.
Okay, thank you,
Councillor
Councillor Campbell.
Abbott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, I'm against this because I think the fees that we're suggesting here should be part of living at Government Place. What concerns me is what if residents don't end up going to their appointments because they're embarrassed they don't have the money and they just don't go. I find this very concerning, and I actually do think it should be part of their living at Government Place.
Any more questions, comment, discussion? Councillor Campbell.
It does concern me, and I do agree, and partly with Councillor Abbott. They are, however, we just have to look at and there is to be, I'm sure I read in here, there'll be a hardship policy where they can apply. If they can't pay, they can apply and have those fees reimbursed. It's a situation at Government Place. It's very close to my heart. It's out of Merriwall, but I think we have to look at something. We have to look at this, what's happening there, and it can't continue to sustain the cost that's being incurred at this stage. And so, provided that I'm sure that's written in there, the hardship policy. That we can do that and we can reimburse. I do believe that there are some residents that won't be able to pay, and I agree, and they should be assisted, but also some that I do believe that probably can pay, and I don't think there would be any problem if they would pay, because some of those residents have come there and they have donated financially very strongly to Government Place, and so I guess that there's going to be a mixture of those people. So yes, I think it's may be something we should support and we should have a look at. Thank you.
Question, Councillor.
Can I close since I didn't open? I just want to say that it doesn't matter what organisation you go with. If you go with a community transport organisation, you're going to have to pay. I agree, though, there needs to be make sure that nobody is disadvantaged and can't attend their medical appointments. So make sure that they are aware of the financial and that somebody on their behalf can do that, because they may not always be in a position to do that.
Yep. Okay, no more questions, comment? All in favour of the recommendation as is? Councillor Collison, Williamson, Watts, McPhee, Clout, Campbell 4, against. Councillor Flaherty and Councillor Abbott. So the motion is carried. Over to page 234, H02.1, Policies for Review, Corporate Services. Going to move up. Move Councillor Williamson, second. Councillor Clout. Questions, comment, discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Abbott.
On page 238 in the policy statement, aims is too broad and promises nothing, and also strives to create, which is just further down, is also as above, basically is also too broad and promises nothing. So is it possible to remove the words aims and strives to create, so that we provide an environment and we create a work environment which promotes, or we provide a work environment. I just think they're too, yes, they're too fluffy. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, you moved. Are you happy with that change? Councillor Evans? I'm happy with that. Councillor Clout, happy with that? Yep. All in favour? Show of hands. Thank you, Councillor Burns.
I'm having difficulty hearing the meeting all of a sudden. Councillor.
I didn't turn my mic on. So all in favour? Councillor Burns, yeah. Against? Councillor McPhee's against. Over to page 280. H02.2 revised code of meeting practice. Mover. Councillor Clout. Seconder. Councillor Burns. Questions, comment, discussion. Councillor McPhee.
Could I ask that we discuss specific points, or are we able to discuss that? Or, yep. Is that okay? Okay, so there was a section on audio visual link. It's 516, I believe it is. There, actually, no, sorry, the briefings, 335. I just find that's a little bit in conflict with what else is done, because if we're voting on this and it says a one section, which is further in the in chapter 5 or section 5, that if somebody's been given permission to attend by audio visual link, there's a process for that. Yet with 3.35, it just says they're simply allowed to attend the briefing. Are we happy to have those things inconsistent or not? So 3.35, pre-meeting briefing sessions may be held by audio visual link, yet we're voting on whether people are able to attend the meeting. So are we happy that those two things are a little bit out of sync?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I'm just not clear on what's not aligned. So if you're saying that 3.35 and 5.16 are contrary?
Not contrary, but it's just that if people have to seek permission or to be voted in, so the council will vote that somebody can attend a meeting and have voting rights, yet there's no discussion about the briefing. I'm just wondering if we're happy with that.
Right, okay. Yeah, because briefings don't formally require a council resolution to allow the councillor to attend, there's no requirement for that in the briefing session.
Or Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you. On page 281, where, well, basically, yes, in the key changes to the model meeting code, the last bullet point there says the new model code of meeting practice removes public participation from the meeting itself. And council has basically said that we're going to continue doing it. But I would like to know where council has read that. Where is the authority for that statement made by council that public participation is removed from council meetings? What clause exactly, what line and what words? Because all I, as I said, pointed out last time, it's only may, it's not must.
Mr. GM.
There's multiple. So if I go to the table, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe if I'll go to the first page, page 287, you can see in the far right column the proposed wording in section 4.6, which has the yellow highlight, or council meeting. We've added those words, or council meeting, in throughout the document. So if I use that one as an example, under the far left column.
Sorry, I'm actually lost. What page are we on?
287.
287.
287, is it?
Yep.
Lovely, thank you.
287.
Thank you.
So section 4.6, first of all, it's discretionary section because it's in red in the far left column.
Yep.
Now this is talking about legal representatives, but the same flow follows through. So I'm going to read some of these out just to make it clear. The new wording within the current code of meeting practice, the model, says legal representatives acting on behalf of others are not to be permitted to speak at a public forum unless they identify their status as a legal representative when applying to speak at the public forum. So this is the first instance where public forum is used and the words council meeting or public participation is removed. You'll see we've added the words or council meeting into that one, into 4.7, into 4.9, into 4.11, we've added the words. So everywhere where you can see in the yellow highlight where we've added the words council meeting, that is a section where previously there was public participation allowed generally during the council meeting, but has now been removed in the new section. So we've added it back in.
So back to 4.1, where at the moment council allows public participation at each ordinary meeting of the council.
Yep.
The suggested words from the Office of Local Government are that the council may hold a public forum prior to each ordinary meeting of the council. So it only says may, it doesn't say must. And again, I'm happy with what council is suggesting, but I'm just being pedantic here because I don't see where council actually has the authority to actually make that claim that we're bending over backwards to permit public participation when the authority, if it is actually there, isn't there in 4.1.
No, so 4.1 is talking about public forum, which is a meeting held prior to the council meeting, not within the public meeting, and all references to public participation, which is the wording that was used previously for public speaking during a meeting, has been removed. So my recollection, and I don't have an easy way of doing a search at the moment in a hard copy, is that you will not find the words public participation now in the new model code, which was the old words that allowed the public to speak in the actual council meeting. That's been re-added with our new version. So we've got the best of both worlds.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, microphone's off. Oh, okay, also I object to taking public participation public participation from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. It's not something that's used a lot, but when it is, I think the 5 minutes, we should be permitting public participants to have 5 minutes. Also on page 299, where we look at, which is in relation to the order of the meeting, I would just like to flag that I would like to see that I would prefer that we follow the Office of Local Government's recommendation and remove the prayer. And then should we continue with the prayer, then we need to be more inclusive of other religions and perhaps share the prayer around. Thank you.
Just Mr. GM, I thought we decided we were going to have 5 minutes. Have I missed that, have I?
No, that was, I think, a conversation with you and I, where you expressed a preference for 5. I think the staff recommendation is still for 3. That's totally at councillors' discretion. That's why we raised it in the body of the report to say that that's a change that we've made. Councillors can do one of two things. You can adopt the 3 minutes, but if a speaker wishes to speak for more than 3, you can always move an extension, or alternatively, you can go back to the 5 minutes if you want to allow 5. We've just found that in some instances, when you do have a large group of people all speaking on the same thing, 5 minutes does become tedious, but it's up to council. It's totally your discretion.
Feelings?
Mr. Mayor, if the, am I just clarifying this, if it's required that the person can't get through their what they're going to have to say in 3 minutes, it can be then applied to the mayor or the council to extension for an extension. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that was my explanation then, that council can seek, the person can seek an extension and council can move an extension.
If we do want to have it as 5 minutes, do we have to amend this motion or how can we do that?
Councillors, you just need to move tonight that the public participation be limited to 5 minutes instead of 3, as proposed in the recommendation. Same with any change to the meeting agenda put forward by Councillor Abbott. If councillors want to change any of that, you would need to move that as part of the recommendation.
So
Mr.
do you
Mayor,
wish to?
I'd like to move that way.
So
Change it
councillor,
from 3 minutes to back to 5 minutes, please.
Second, and I'll second that.
well, councillor Clout, you move the recommendation. You happy to move it to 5 minutes? And councillor Burns, you were the seconder?
Oh, look, I 5 minutes, 3 minutes. If you don't get your point across in the first minute, you're not going to get there, are you?
Well, let's,
So, yeah, if it's 5 minutes, it's fine with me.
Councillor Watson is going to move that little bit from 3 to 5, and I'll put it straight up, eh?
And just with respect to my, the fact that the Office of Local Government's recommendation is setting out the general order of business, they set it out without a prayer. What does this council think of that? And if we do go with the prayer, can we share it around with other religions?
Mr. Mayor, I think they should be, it's totally separate to the first recommendation.
Well, if the mover and the seconder wishes, I'm quite happy with it is, but it's up to, is councillor Clout and councillor Burns happy with the recommendation as is, changing 3 minutes to 5? If you're happy with that, I'll put that up. Thank you. So all in favour, show of hands.
This is for 3 minutes to 5.
3 minutes to 5. That's the only change on the. All in favour, councillor Collison, Watts, McPhee, Clout, Campbell, Abbott for, councillor Williamson against.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we do want to remove the prayer, is that another amendment that we add in now?
No, too late, councillor Flaherty. I've just had the show of hands.
I'm sorry, I feel that I've been misled. I thought we were just considering the moving from 3
No, I
minutes to 5
said I
minutes.
was putting it up with a small recommendation of councillor Clouts and Burns to change 3 minutes to 5 as was, and they both nodded.
I rescind mine. I am not voting for this. I think we should discuss this because we actually haven't discussed the model code of meeting practice. We had a very brief time at just prior to the January meeting where 2 councillors were missing anyway, and now we haven't actually discussed it. So I would like to discuss
Councillor
this.
Abbott, we had a briefing on this some weeks ago. I think we were told to all go away and look at it with a couple of changes, right, Mr. GM, and to notify staff of any changes. I did ask the general manager earlier, did he get any feedback from any councillors? And the reply was 0. So,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarity, when we looked at that point and Councillor Campbell said about the prayer, you said that would be a separate point. That's why I thought we were just voting on the 3 to 5 minutes and then it would be a separate point in terms of the prayer. Was my understanding. That's what you just said.
well, yeah, righto. So a councillor's going to have to move. The recommendation's in front of me. If they want to move something separate, you're going to have to foreshadow the original recommendation.
Is it possible for us to add, as we've just added the change from 3 to 5 minutes, to also add in not having to have the prayer?
Mr. Mayor, I object to that. That's a separate thing altogether.
It's not separate.
It's already been passed.
It can come, well,
Mr. Mayor, it wasn't adopted by the mover and a seconder, so
No.
you've allowed the vote on that first point to go through.
Yep.
A second amendment can be put forward by Councillor Flaherty or Councillor Abbott, who wants to.
Well, I'm happy to
talk
move. I move that we follow the Office of Local Government's recommendation and we remove the prayer.
I second the motion.
if I put this up and that dot point 4 is lost, we're going back to the dot point, the 3 dot points, correct? Okay then, we all clear?
Sorry, your microphone seemed to have dropped out. Could you just reiterate?
I'm going to put up the recommendation 1, 2 and 3 with addition to change to 3 minutes to 5. Then I'm going to put a dot point 4 up, Councillor Abbott's. If it's lost, we're going back to the original recommendation, which will be the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Show of hands for the add of the prayer.
Well, I'd just like to talk to it, given that I've moved it. I would like to do this because it's something that the Office of Local Government have recommended. I'd just like to mention section 116 of the Australian Constitution basically says we are free to practice any religion or not practice any religion. I think removing the prayer would make this a lot simpler. And if this motion is lost, I would like us to consider sharing the prayer around, so it's not just a Christian prayer, that we look at other religions as well.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I'm going to put the motion up. Those in favour of the motion 1, 2, 3 and 4, hands up. So Councillors Watts, Clout, Abbott and Flaherty are for. Against? Councillor Collison, Williamson, Clout, Campbell and Burns against. Not Clout, McPhee, sorry, is against. So that motion is lost. We go back to the original recommendation of dot point 1, 2 and 3 by Clout and Burns. Show of hands. For it. For the original recommendation with the change of 3 minutes to 5, which Councillor Clout moved and Councillor Burns second. Show of hands. So it's myself, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Clout, Councillor McPhee, Councillor Burns for it and against it. That's the same. Councillor Abbott, Councillor Watts and Councillor Williamson. Okay, motion is carried. Over to page 2391, NM02.1. Notice of motion, Scone Memorial Airport Project. Councillor Flaherty, are you moving your motion?
Yes, I would like to move the motion. Do I speak now? Or...
Councillor Abbott is seconding. Councillor Flaherty, you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. I am concerned about developments out at the airport in terms of the original specification which council approved for the development at some stage being changed, particularly in relation to the surface infrastructure on the airside. And now it's come to our attention that there are issues with the surface of the airside infrastructure. It is in dispute as to why there are issues out there now with the contractor. And I understand whilst there may be an investigation into the changed parameters and why it's not working, I'm very interested to understand how it changed from what council approved and what those financial ramifications are going to be. We've already had you, Mr. Mayor, say that you will be applying for more grant funding to have hot mix on the runway. So it could end up being more ratepayer money and more grant money. And I would like an accurate report that's independent of anyone who may have been involved in the situation to see what the ramifications are of that being changed without council's consent and what the costs of that have been.
Okay. Mr. GM, as I said before, if the funding source, has that been sourced for this motion to get put up?
No, so at the moment, councillors, there's $9,000 allocated for expert advice in regard to the seal design and the contractor's application of that seal. From what I'm hearing from Councillor Flaherty is she's seeking probably a broader investigation into some of the historic decisions made by either council or staff in regard to the change from an asphalt seal to a spray seal. That's not allocated in the council works today. And if council resolved to do so, we would need to find the funding for that. As the staff report identifies, we'd need to be clear on exactly what the scope was before actually bringing a figure back to council for that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think that we can term it historical. I wouldn't term the beginning of this project historical in nature. It's quite current. And so for the amount of money that we've had on all kinds of consultants for this airport, which is fair enough because it is the largest infrastructure project we have undertaken in the Shire. And I think that an assessment of why we've got failures on the air side is important to understand and to understand the whole context, not just analysing a small part of that, but looking at it from the beginning of what council approved, how it changed, why it changed, and what that cost and likely ongoing issue could be.
Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Mayor, I think that I don't agree with the extra amount of money, but I think that, didn't we discuss or have it discussed that there was a investigation which council had endeavoured to find out why these things had happened. I think once we start to go back digging into the areas, we've got to find out what's happening. And I do notice that most of these complaints, etc., are by people who have been against the project right from the word go. And I just wonder whether there's a certain amount of bias that has caused this to be continually brought up. I believe that the council investigation should be allowed to take place, and if they find that that is a deadlock or cannot ascertain exactly what's happened, well, then maybe we should come back to council and say, well, maybe we should have a further investigation. But am I correct in the fact that is it GHD, or am I thinking of something else that has been engaged to find this out and to investigate? Is that correct?
No.
Mr. GM, you'd like to answer that, please?
Darracon was the original contractor. GHD is being engaged to give us some expert advice because we've lodged a defect notice against Darracon to do the repairs. In order to support our defect notice, we need the report from GHD. Councillors, the reason I use the word historic, and I just want to pick up on Councillor Flaherty's concern, is that council made a decision to accept a tender for a spray seal. The decisions around the financing and the decision that was made prior to that tender. So I'd need to, it's some time ago, I need to go back and find that information out. I believe it's a matter of public record, and I'm happy to provide that back to council as to the decision-making process and how the decision was made to go from an asphalt seal to a spray seal. Haven't got a problem with doing that. But if you want to engage an independent external investigator to investigate that, I can't give you a price at the moment.
Mr. Mayor, I just believe that council should be allowed to investigate that and then get the results of that before we go any further.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Picking up on what Councillor...
You signing off on the motion now?
If anyone else wants to speak, I'll wait until the end.
Councillor Abbott, sorry.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that we were warned about the seal and that we were warned that it ought to be hot mix as opposed to bitumen. Well, hot weather's always been an issue here in Scone, so it ought not to have been a surprise when we saw things lifting with the hot weather that we have. We have hot weather and it's only going to get hotter, so it's only going to get worse. So I do support this motion. It was problematic when we made the switch back then, that we went from the hot mix to bitumen. That was a problem, and it's caused a lot of problems out at the airport.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott, and I'll say it again, I've said it 100 times. We had no choice with the budget we had because we were getting backlash from the community of over budget by 2.5 to 3 million. There was no choice but to go to the seal that's on there, or we probably wouldn't have had a runway. There's been a lot of issues, a lot of things we've picked up on that runway. We've carried the burden of it. So anyway, that's the motion's for. I don't know, Councillor, Mr. GM, can the motion be put up without the funding source?
The Code of Meeting Practice requires that if council adopts a notice of motion that requires funding, you need to identify where the funding source is coming from.
So just quickly, is there a funding source available for it?
Well, the difficulty is, whilst I can't give you a price at the moment on what it's likely to cost. I need to do some investigation. So if council want to go down this path, you would need to probably do it in two parts, where you request the general manager and the staff to get an estimate and identify a funding source to be brought back to the next council meeting. The alternative is not to adopt this at this stage, wait for the investigation to run its course, and we can report back on that.
Mr. Chairman, would that be a foreshadow? To foreshadow and say to vote against this and to wait until we have the report?
That would be a foreshadow
Then
motion.
I'd like to put that foreshadow in, please.
Okay, then we'll go back to the original the original motion as is. Moved by Councillor Flaherty, second by Councillor Abbott. We're going to put that up. If that's lost, that's the end. Okay. Show of hands, please, for the recommendation. So there's Councillor Flaherty, Councillor Abbott and Councillor Watts for it. Yeah, Flaherty, sorry, yes, Flaherty. And against is Collison, Williamson, McPhee, Clout and Campbell. So the motion is lost. So now foreshadowed motion, Councillor McPhee.
My foreshadowed motion would be that we wait until we have the report before we move further. The report from
Council.
From council.
DRT. Second, okay, you got that's clear. That's moved by Councillor McPhee, second by Councillor Campbell. All in favour? Collison, Williamson, McPhee, Campbell and Flaherty and Burns. Against the foreshadowed is Councillor Watts and Councillor Abbott. The foreshadowed is passed. Councillor Clout, were you for it? You're against? Okay, Councillor Clout, just add that, Robin, please. So the foreshadowed is the motion. Thank you. Okay, councillors, over to page 393. The council note the questions received and responses provided, if they're not for debate. Okay, got a mover just to note the questions.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
They're not for debate. You can get
Yes,
some
I'm not
clarification.
debating. Yes, clarification. I'm actually interested in Councillor Flaherty's question, where council's response is the expected revenue and attendance at the 2018 air show was 302,000. Basically, but that wasn't what we actually made because we didn't make any
We're
money.
getting into debate.
It's not, I'm not debating.
Clarification.
Okay,
Councillor.
clarification. Why, that was what we estimated, but so what?
Mr. Mayor, the question was about revenue. Councillor Abbott's correct. That doesn't tell you how much is made because obviously profit is revenue less costs.
Okay, councillor, got a mover for that, please.
I still have a couple. I'd just like to say thank you to Mr. Joyce because we have, when you looked at my questions, when this paper was done, we hadn't heard from him, but we have now. And I'd just like to say thank you to him for replying to us. Thank you very much. And also, I have a further question to my question number 3, which was, did Upper Hunter Shire Council call for expression of interest after entering into the lease with the Aero Club?
I think the response is very clear. And we've spoke about this, I reckon, on 10 occasions. Mr. GM, you got any more to add to that?
No, Mr. Mayor, we'll take the question on notice.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, that's the end of the agenda. Someone like to move us into closed council, please?
Moved.
Move Councillor Burns, second. Councillor Campbell, all in favour? Against?
Yes.
Against moving into closed?
Yes, so yes, I'm against going into closed because I'm disappointed that I wasn't provided with these documents.
No, excuse me, Councillor Abbott. All we're doing is moving into closed. Thank you. I've got a mover and a seconder, so we're moving into closed.
But I can comment.
Councillor Abbott, when we go off air, we can't